Sounds good. What time do you want us to start? 1. Guys, it's 2 o'clock. 1. A little bit before 1. Yeah. It's time for us to get started. So. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our November 30th Rotary Club of Columbus meeting. We call the meeting to order. At this point, I would ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point, I'd like to call on Reggie. He would come forth and give us invocation according to his faith tradition. Reggie, if you would come.
Let us pray. Oh, dear Lord, we come this day, Lord. Thank you for your many blessings that you bestowed upon us. Oh, dear Heavenly Father, during this holiday season, ask that you be with each and every Rotary member and their families, Lord. Bless them, dear Heavenly Father. Dear Heavenly Father, I ask that you bless our speaker for today. And dear Lord, I ask that you bless this food that we're about to receive. Let it be nourishment and strength for our body. This I do pray in thy Son Jesus' name, amen. And please remember to feed the hungry cans that are on your tables.
Thank you so much. At this point, we call on Ms. Courtney, if you would come and give us news for today. Either one.
Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, November 30th, and here's a look at your headlines. Shopper turnout hit record highs over Black Friday weekend. A record number of holiday shoppers, 196 million, flocked back to stores and hunted for deals from Thanksgiving to Cyber Monday. Callaway Resort and Gardens celebrates its 30th annual Christmas show with 10 million lights. For 3 decades, millions of families have made fantasy and lights a cherished Christmas tradition. Featuring more than 10 million lights this year, one of the biggest spectacles of the trolley ride includes Celebration Lake, which pays tribute to the past 30 years of fantasy and lights. Stone Mountain Park cancels its popular Snow Mountain attraction. The park has canceled its popular attraction show for the 22-23 season. The annual event began back in 2008, but hasn't taken place since the start of the pandemic. Instead of Snow Mountain, the park says it's going to focus on a new magical Christmas drone show and the world's largest Christmas light show. And finally, Chick-fil-A is selling merchandise for the first time ever. If your holiday wish list includes a Chick-fil-A sauce-themed blanket or a chicken nugget pillow, look no further. The chicken chain launched its first ever online store. It's filled with quirky merchandise that pays homage to the cult favorite items. Highlights include an I Heart Waffle Fries hoodie, chicken for breakfast hat, and a clutch in the shape of a Chick-fil-A sandwich package. The chain is already planning for more merchandise next year. This morning, the Dow Jones was down 200 points. The forecast today is partly cloudy, high of 68.
Thank you so much, Courtney. At this point, we'd like to call on Melody, if you would come and recognize our visitors and guests. No, can't hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
There we go. Yes, I do have laryngitis, and an abundance of caution, being the good healthcare person I am, I have a mask on. But thank you, President Cedric. I'd like to introduce Omar Webb. He's a graduate of Georgia Tech and National Security, and he's a guest of Amy Bryant. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Melody. At this point, I'd like to call on past President Ryan, the chair of the nominating committee. He'll come up and present the names of 3 new club directors, beginning, the term would begin July 1st of 2023. Past President Ryan, if you would come.
President Cedric and fellow Rotarians, it's my privilege today to be here on behalf of our nominating committee. I serve as the chair along with Greg Camp and Betsy Covington, and today we're honored to bring into nomination 3 new board members who will take, if approved next week at our next meeting, office July 1st. Those 3 board members are Otis Pickett, Rebecca Nix, and Jim Gordon. Thank you for giving this opportunity to serve.
Thank you. Thank you for the committee. Give them a hand for their hard work. At this point, I'd like to actually call on Mike Smythe, if you would come, recognize our Colonel Ralph Puckett Jr., Soldier of the Week.
Hello? There we are. Hey, President Cedric and fellow Rotarians, it's my privilege and my pleasure to introduce to you this afternoon Staff Sergeant Nathan Anderson. Staff Sergeant Anderson is an 11 Charlie, which is a mortarman, who currently is assigned as a senior drill instructor on Sand Hill at Fort Benning. He's had various assignments and deployments, as you might expect for an NCO with 15 years of service. He has served in many leadership roles as a mortarman NCO, to include platoon sergeant, section sergeant, squad leader, vehicle commander, and gunner, among others. He's had 2 combat deployments, one in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, another in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. He has completed many courses in his career in the Army, and as you might expect for NCO of his years of service and rank, he's completed all the leadership courses up through senior leader course. He's also obviously a graduate of the United States Army Drill Sergeant Academy, and he's completed the Infantry Mortar Leaders course, as you might expect. Also, an interesting course that he completed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. If some of you need help with your Kalashnikov or AK-47, he completed the Special Forces Foreign Weapons course, and I thought it was just the weapons of our allied nations, but it was the other guys' weapons too, so that was interesting. So he said he's taken them apart and put them together and fired them. He's received numerous awards and decorations. He has 5 awards of the Army Commendation Medal, 3 awards of the Army Achievement Medal, and the Meritorious Unit Citation. Of course, the U.S. Army Drill Sergeant Badge and the Combat Infantry Badge. He's married to his wife, Misty. They have 3 children, their son Eric, who's 4, daughter Abigail, who's 9, and daughter Aliana, who is, I didn't say that right, did I? Elena, who is 10. And he hails from Oconto Falls, Wisconsin, and he hopes to settle in Colorado after he completes his time in the Army. Staff Sergeant, we've got some things for you. So I think I have it here. I have a rotary coin for you, that you probably know what to do with, for a memento of your visit here today. And then we have this passport to the arts, so you and your wife can enjoy events at the River Center, the Columbus Symphony Orchestra, the Columbus State University Theater Department, the Springer Opera House, and the, I think it's the paid attractions at the National Infantry Museum. So that is for you. We also have a certificate commemorating you as our Colonel Ralph Puckett Soldier of the Week. And then finally, we have a book that was authored by Colonel Puckett, and inside it has, it's Words for Warriors, a professional soldier's notebook. It has a description of the actions taken by Colonel Puckett back in 1950 that allowed him to receive the Medal of Honor. And this book has been dedicated to you by Rotarian Dickie Saunders. It's in memory of his father-in-law, Charles O. Wyke, who served honorably as a commander in the Navy during World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So we want you to have that as well. Please join me in a warm Rotary Club welcome for Staff Sergeant Anderson.
just like to say thank you, and it is an honor and privilege to be here today.
Staff Sergeant Anderson, on behalf of the 280 members of this club, we just like to first welcome you and thank you for being here with us today. Please take back to your fellow soldiers on Fort Benning how much we appreciate what you all do for our country and our nation. Let's give him a hand for being with us again. Thank you so much for being with us. Just to back up so that we'll get our left hand and our right hand together on the same page, we received nominations of directors just briefly a minute ago, and what we want to do is ask, are there any other nominations that would be brought to this committee from the floor? Any other nominations for directors? Okay. It's been motioned and properly seconded that the nominations be closed. And I'd ask to vote from the club. All in favor of those three nominees that have been put before us to be elected to the board itself, would you signify by raising your hand or saying aye? Aye. Are there any or is there any opposition? Okay, thank you so much for that. Few announcements. Many of you familiar with the House Habitat project that we've currently got going on. It's an invitation to us as a club for those that would like to be a part of a photo opportunity that will take place this coming Saturday out at the site from somewhere between 8 a.m. until noon. They invite you out to that. And of course, we have a special homecoming holiday social on December the 14th. We've been asking us in the club to invite people that we know that are part of the club, we just hadn't seen them around. Let's invite some of our old friends, some of our old Rotarians to come and be a part of that. Also, we wanted to let you know that in the back of the room, there's also a sign-up for the bell ringing, which takes place over on Whittlesey at the name of the store? Hobby Lobby. Thank you so much. Over at Hobby Lobby. Please sign up that. And directories also are in the back or on the outside of the door, I'm sorry. For those that have not picked up your directory, please do so. Pick those directories up on the outside. This point, what I'd like to do is thank Reggie for bringing us our invocation. And at this point, I'd like to call on Tom Weinig, President-elect Tom Weinig, to come and introduce our program for today. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Cedric. It's my privilege to introduce Reverend Vann Ellison, who joined the Valley Rescue Mission as President and CEO in November of 2021. He comes to the mission with a diverse background, having served the less fortunate throughout his adult life. God has called him to serve in medical, psychiatric, and drug rehabilitation facilities, as well as jails and prisons. For the 17 years prior to moving to the Chattahoochee Valley, he served as president and CEO of St. Matthew's House in Naples, Florida. He is known in the rescue mission community as an innovator, creating new programs and social enterprises to increase the impact of the ministry. When asked what he's most passionate about, he responds, family, being a husband, father, son, and friend. The nature of his leadership is to approach the calling and work as an extension of his Christian family. Vann is married to Lisa, and they have 4 adult sons, 3 daughters-in-law, a precious granddaughter, and a fairly new grandson. I had the privilege of sitting with Vann shortly after he arrived with our community, and we had a delightful conversation. And as I walked away, I thank God because before me was the right man for the right job at the right time, and I'm glad he's a part of our community. Vann?
Thank you. You know, I appreciate this club, being part of it for a few months now. One of the best things about it is there's a clock right up here, so I'll behave myself. You don't have a preacher up here with a microphone and no clock. It's a very dangerous thing. So, well, the introduction was nice. I have an older sister who's 11 months older than I am, and because of my work in drug rehabs and jails and homeless shelters. You know, whenever she introduces me, she always says, "That's my brother that spent his whole life in jails or rehab." And, and so we don't talk about her much, but it is a joy to be here and to share with you some really good news. The Valley Rescue Mission, where I've been called to serve and privileged to serve, has been in this community far longer than I have. In 1963, we're coming up on our 60th anniversary as a mission. A gentleman named Howard Mott was driving around town and kept noticing alcoholic men on the side of the street, seeing the brokenness in their faces and pulling over and starting to talk to them. Many of them were World War II veterans or Korean War veterans who had PTSD. They didn't have that diagnosis or that label then. When a guy got through and burned out after a rough time, oftentimes they just moved to the streets and were called a bum. And so Mr. Mott and so many other people, 2 of our board members are members of this club. Johnny Johnson is our treasurer and a longest-serving board member, has been with the mission for 50 years, and Mark Overby's been with the mission for about 10 years now, and both past chairs and just wonderful people. But you know what happened is Mr. Mott and so many people in the community came together because they saw broken men on the side of the street. And they said, our faith compels us to do something about it. And when you think about homelessness and you think about the issues, if we started a public dialogue about homelessness and you think about San Francisco or Los Angeles or New York, we were talking a little bit up here, and you know, they have spent billions of dollars trying to address an issue that candidly no government can fix. And when I give these talks and have conversations about homelessness, oftentimes the question is asked, well, why are there so many homeless? And if I turned it back to you guys and said, tell me, why are people homeless today? Somebody over here would say, well, alcoholism, and that's one of the factors, and drug addiction, and crime, mental health issues, loss of a job, family breakup, medical crisis that leads to homelessness. And all of those are true. But the one factor that the Valley Rescue Mission started addressing in 1963 was that homeless people are alone more than anybody else. If I talked around these tables, some of our family, at every one of these tables, there's going to be people that have had a family history of mental illness or addiction or job loss or an unfortunate criminal issue. But the reason that our loved ones, oftentimes the reason that maybe we're not on the streets or weren't there, is because we have each other. We have a fellowship of Rotarians. We have a church community. We have people that care about us. Something else interesting happened in 1964. 1 year after the Valley had started here, is Lyndon Johnson. For those of you that are old enough to remember, for the young people here, he was president. Lyndon Johnson declared the war on poverty in 1964 and created HUD. This year, the HUD budget is $234 billion. And his goal was that we would wipe out poverty, mostly in the inner city, addressing housing issues and addressing homelessness. And to date, HUD has spent trillions of dollars, probably around $15 trillion, to address homelessness and poverty. And yet the poverty rates in America have not changed. And the homelessness rates have actually increased. When COVID happened, back in March of 2020, we knew in the rescue mission business that this was going to be catastrophic for the homeless. Not because we were concerned about them getting COVID. I had a reporter at the time I was in Naples ask me, are you worried about COVID outbreak in your shelter or with the homeless population? And the governor of California had stated that there'd be 50,000 dead homeless people because of COVID. And I said, you know, the thing is, at that time, I said, I don't know any homeless people that have visited Wuhan province lately. I don't know of any homeless people that are getting a lot of close personal contact. Usually we see them and we avoid them. Their immune systems are robust. They're out in nature and they get lots of vitamin D. So at the end of last year, recorded numbers of homeless deaths from COVID was about 400 people nationally. They were really immune to this. I'm not recommending you avoid vaccines and go become homeless to avoid COVID. But what our crisis was we knew that in isolation, the homeless people were going to be even more desperate. Their suicide rates would go up, their overdose death rates, their sense of despair and despondency would only increase. What I can report to you is that during that time, Valley Rescue Mission continued to serve meals. Early on, probably with masks on our faces and gloves on our hands and people not sure what we were going to catch from who. But what happened is I served in a rescue mission and I heard a lot of the homeless were very panicked, and I showed up at the rescue mission, the soup line, and basically started talking to guys, and they were afraid, well, if, we don't know what we're going to do. If everybody's shutting down, the economy's closed, what's going to happen? And one guy said, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to find a cop and I'm going to hit him. Well, that's always worked. That's a good plan. And sarcasm was my main parenting tool with my kids. But the reality is, his thought was, well, maybe if they lock me up, I'll at least have some place to be safe. I'll be fed, I'll be cared for. He said, what's going to happen is you can count on the community of faith. We're going to be on the front lines and we're going to be here for you. And so today at the Valley Rescue Mission, we have a women's shelter for women and children. It has 60 beds. It opened in 2019. The community here, I can take no credit for it, but I've literally visited hundreds of shelters all across America. And we at the Valley Rescue Mission, Muskogee County, Columbus, Georgia, has built one of the best facilities anywhere in the world. I visited shelters and operations overseas. Anybody in any community would be proud to have that women and children's facility in their community, because we have individual rooms where a mom can come in. It's interesting, over the years, looking at homeless children coming into a shelter, people don't think about how many homeless there are. Well, and how many kids there are that are homeless. Every school in the Muskogee County School District, every school in the Russell and Lee County districts this year has homeless kids in them. Kids that there's the McKinney-Vento Act that provides extra resources. And all of those schools identify there are children who are homeless. More than 65% of them are with a single mother. And when that single mom asks for help to turn her life around, we have a facility that takes them in, gives them dignity, gives them a room, makes sure they have proper clothing, the kids are taken care of, they're fed, and we put that mom on a plan to turn her life around. She has to get a job, so sometimes that means we start with job training. And we work with many community partners. I don't know, most everybody I know here in Columbus has been here longer than me. One of the unique factors in Columbus, when I ask where something is, everybody in Columbus always tells me it's by where something used to be. You know where the McDonald's used to be? No, I don't. And what used to be here, I can tell you, is there were a lot more homeless women and children on the streets. And the Valley Rescue Mission is where there used to be a lot of homeless people. Today, lives are being changed. Today, in our 60-bed facility, we have 17 families that we're dealing with to help those moms track to getting their kids back in a healthy home and a healthy environment. We have, on that same property, we have a women's addiction recovery program. That's a 9 to 12-month program that most people come to us right out of jail. Having been a jail chaplain, we were talking a little bit about my corrections experience. I was a chaplain in our county jail for a long time, and I found out that the Department of Correction, that's an oxymoron. They don't really correct anything. But we spend a lot of money locking people up, and sometimes when somebody's there and a drug problem is identified and a judge or a prosecutor or an attorney talks to somebody about changing their life, what we're finding is that people who have come to jail to our programs are actually our best students. because they know what the other side is. And the fact that we greet them with a smile and a kind word, we greet them as friends, as family members. I always talk to our staff. The men and the women we serve are to be taken in as brothers and sisters and sons and daughters. We're to love them and care for them, because if we don't, who will? And you know what? Why I think that HUD hasn't fixed homelessness. If homelessness could be fixed with just money, HUD would have done it already, because we spent more than enough. What has to happen is those governmental resources are essential and they're important, provide housing. But what we're doing in Columbus is we're holding people accountable to work a plan. One of the great psychological thinkers of the 20th, Viktor Frankl, who developed logotherapy. Logotherapy, Frankl was a Jewish man who was in the concentration camps for 2 years, and his wife, unborn child, his parents, many of his family members and friends were killed by the Nazis. And Frankl looked for meaning in that, looked for purpose. And when he got out and opened a clinic and started working with patients, they were almost all Holocaust survivors. And what Frankl never experienced in the course of his practice was one suicide. Because what he started doing was focusing on logotherapy, was helping a person find purpose and meaning. And when you take somebody in just as a poor guy who needs stuff, you're really taking him in as a beggar. When you take somebody who has less, you're kind of looking down on him. When you look at that man or woman with somebody created in the image of God with a plan and a purpose, and help them get on that heroic quest of finding freedom and transformation, you know what happens? They begin to walk a little taller. They begin to see themselves as somebody of significance and importance. So at the Valley, every day, we're seeing men and women walk out of there to get their first job, maybe in years. We're seeing men and women find hope and freedom from addiction, find faith. Faith-based organizations nationally, there was a Baylor University study, said an effective work with homelessness, faith-based organizations do about 60% of the heavy lifting around America. Without the church community showing up and saying, our faith calls us to do this. One of the best ways to illustrate that is, as a little boy, I'm the youngest child, the only boy, and therefore my parents' favorite. I'm sure my sisters would agree to that. But on vacation one year, going up north to visit family, when some of us were kids, you went on vacation to visit family. You didn't go to theme parks and cruises and stuff. That, I don't like my family enough to do that anymore, but we used to. And going up the road at about age 6 with my family, we stopped at an Arby's. And you all remember the old Arby's had the concrete table with the big metal umbrellas out front that you ordered at the window. They were preparing for COVID even back in the 60s. And so we sat out front, and as I'm sitting at this table, a homeless man comes up to us. At the time, as a little boy, we thought he's a bum. And I had a sister a year older than me and a sister 10 years older than me. And my little sister Jan and I both thought this was the coolest thing in the world, to get to eat lunch with a bum. Because he asked for a cup of coffee. Could I get a quarter for a cup of coffee or some food? And so my dad said, I won't give you any money because you'll just buy a drink. But I will invite you to have a meal with my family. And you don't have to. He said, come on, sit down. What would you like? And he ordered this guy an Arby's sandwich and a drink and whatever else they served. And we ate, had a great time. And when we got back in our car to head out, my sister, who was 16, teenagers are real focused on what others think of them. And, we were probably about 500 miles from our home in South Florida and driving up north through Georgia. And my sister just lost it on my dad. How could you do that? You invited a bum to eat with us. He could have killed the kids, Jan and I, because, Arby's and a bum, that's certainly a death sentence. And and what if somebody had seen us? We're 500 miles from home on the side road in outside of Atlanta, Georgia. I don't think all of your high school classmates are going to see. And my dad Only time I ever saw my dad get angry in my whole life. Pulled the car over and turned around at my sister and he said, "My brother Frank, after getting out of the Army, was never right." And he died homeless on the streets of New York City. And I don't know if that's somebody else's Frank, but he's going to have somebody that loves him today, and that's us. You know, at age 6, I found my calling. I realized by sharing a meal with a homeless man, lives could actually be changed. I don't know what happened to that guy. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "Be careful, you might be entertaining angels unaware." I don't know if he was a gift from God, but it certainly shaped the whole purpose and meaning of my life, because I saw in my dad's heart and eyes. I never knew my Uncle Frank, who died on the streets. My dad was the most noble and honorable and godly man I ever knew. But the only time he ever lost it on us kids was in defense of the idea that we should reach out and care for a homeless man. You know, and I think that's what we've seen at the Valley Rescue Mission over the years. I'm so proud to serve an organization that for close to 60 years has been the leading not-for-profit addressing this issue. In the men's program, we reopened our men's shelter with a revitalized program. About half the men who have graduated so far left the military at Fort Benning and ended up struggling on our streets. And we didn't just do the easy thing and find them an apartment. What we did was we helped them deal with their isolation, their shame. A couple of them were not in the best discharge status. I didn't look at their discharge status too closely, but I knew that they hadn't done it real well. What I did find out, though, is that they were men who had lost hope. And by telling them that they could have value and they could have purpose, so they started working with us to turn their lives around. What we do today is we invite the community to come and sit at a table like I did as a little boy and see if God won't touch your heart for the plight of a homeless person. You know, one of the best things we can do as the Valley Rescue Mission is we can't spend or buy our way out of homelessness. I believe our rates are going to continue to drop for homelessness here. Nationally, they're only getting worse. Inflation affects poor families the worst and the most profoundly. Many of us have a little bit of a safety net. So if food prices go up, we're okay. My wife and I have been working our whole adult lives, and so if the inflation hits us a little bit, we're going to be all right. The poor family, the single mom with no safety net, she's the one that's going to be coming to us for the next year or two for food. They may be eating in our dining room. This afternoon at what we call Loaves and Fishes, our public feeding event, we're going to see grandmothers bringing in little kids because that's going to be their meal. You know, what's interesting and surprised to me in dealing with homelessness is we ask the kids in our care, what do you want to be when you grow up? Again, that whole idea of giving them a sense of meaning and purpose. And you know what half of those kids said? Just a little over half of them. Something my kids never said. You know, I grew up, I raised 4 boys, I had 5 foster sons, then we figured out how to make them at home, and that was fun and easy. And so we made our own. And we now have 2 foster kids again. But, you know, in raising our kids, none of them ever ask, you know, hey, Dad, what's it take to be a teacher? I want to be a teacher when I grow up. And about a little over half the homeless kids we serve say, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. And my, being a mischievous student, would say, why? You know, once you're out of school, you don't have to go back. It's not a sentence or anything. Well, for them, school is the place where there's food. It's warm in the winter. It's cool in the hot months. There's rules on how people have to treat you. You know, the teacher may raise her voice, but he or she is not going to be violent. You're not going to see all kinds of horrible things at school. You're going to see who cares about you. The adults are dressed like adults and behaving like adults. Almost all of our kids see that person, and I believe every homeless kid we serve is just one caring adult away from living a very significant life. The 14-year-old that we're fostering today my son, who lives here locally, and was taking him on a college tour with a couple other kids from his youth group. Ethan was in the back seat, and they were talking about what they wanted to do. And they said, well, Ethan, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, well, I never thought about really growing up, but if I'm alive when I'm 40, I probably will be a drunk. And, you know, we started talking to Ethan about his hope and started realizing that maybe he could be something. And the pastor of the church was talking about how he's said, at best, I was a C student. And Ethan looked at me and said, I'm a C student. I said, at best. And with a lot of threats and harassment, you're a C student. But, you know, he started realizing, he said, maybe I could do something. Well, I said, well, almost all preachers are C students. It's okay. And so, no offense. So, but what he started realizing, because he saw in us the look of hope, not the look of disgust. You know, he was raised in a family where his mother is in prison. His dad's been in multiple drug rehabs. His grandmother that was raising him died of an overdose while he was at school. You know, with nothing. The whole family's addicted, in prison, just a mess. And to look at somebody who loves him and could say, you know, maybe there is hope. And so the calling for us as Rotarians, Rotarians do dangerous, brave, and courageous work. On the way in, I was listening to a newscast where they were talking about in Pakistan today, there was an explosion where 3 polio vaccine workers and a security guard were murdered in Pakistan because they were giving polio vaccines, blown up in a car bomb by the Pakistani version of the Taliban. You know who was funding those folks? It was us. Because Rotarians have taken on tough challenges. Well, Columbus has a history. Valley Rescue Mission is proof of that, of taking on tough challenges and loving broken people, giving structure and hope. And, you know, for us, there's 2 guardrails. The Bible talks about walking on the straight and narrow. For us, those guardrails, love on one side and discipline on the other. Without structure and without help and without direction, they're just going to feel enabled. If they just have love, it just looks sloppy and messy, and you just end up spoiled, people out of control. If you just have discipline and no love, it just looks authoritarian, and it gives them something to rebel against. Well, we take in your community, Columbus, Georgia, take in homeless men, women, and children, because God cares and so do you. And so we want to thank you for all the work you do as a community. Invite you to come down. You know, I want to, one last story with a preacher, there's always multiple last endings, but one last story is the mission I ran in South Florida one time. On my way in, I found a 26-year-old young man in our lobby going through some children's books. I brought in some of my kids' books, and they had outgrown them or hadn't used them because they're boys. And he was going through these kids' books. And I said, Jason, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going to teach myself how to read. I said, really? So I sat down, I started talking to Jason. He was a severe epileptic from a head injury. And he said, you know, I'd try in school, and after I had a seizure, I would always forget the last few days' worth of stuff. And I was having seizures almost every day as a kid. So today, I still can't read. And he was and they had tried everything they could medication-wise. They'd done everything possible they thought would work. And he was a little more stable now, wasn't having as many seizures, but he still couldn't read and write. And so I said, all right, we had a shelter that had a lot of focus on addiction recovery. And I said, you know, you really need help with learning to read. So I asked several teachers, would they come in and do a tutor team? Instead of in the evenings, him going to AA meetings or working on his addiction, could they help Jason learn to read? And so they started looking at Jason, teaching him to read, and about 6 months later, he was still in our shelter, and he came up, asked to talk to me, came to my office. He said, Van, I'm moving out. I just want to let you know how much I appreciate all y'all have done, shook my hand. Well, where are you going, Jason? I'm moving to St. Petersburg, Florida. And really? That's usually where people go to die. What are you doing there? And, and so he said, well, once I learned how to read, and I've spent most of my days in the library over the last few months, and I found that there's a program for epileptics where they do a surgery to split the two lobes of their brain, and they've looked at my CAT scans. They think that maybe they can cure my epilepsy. And what happened is, because we identified what the brokenness in this guy's life was, his shame, his lack of knowledge, we helped him accomplish the ability to learn. You know what happened? He went to St. Pete. He's the only guy that survived it. And they divided the lobes of his brain. He stopped having seizures. About a year later, he had moved back down to where we were, and he was working full-time. He went off disability benefits, and he was looking to buy his first house. And it was all because people of faith showed up, listened to his problems, and helped him be the hero of his own story. So today, Jason is living as an independent man, a tax-paying citizen, no longer homeless. There is a cure, there is hope, and we have the answers. So God bless you, and thank you for letting me share. I probably have time for a question or two. So.
Question, a couple of questions, we got.
Are you still affiliated with the Crossroads program up in Hamilton?
Yeah, the Crossroads is our men's addiction recovery program. That's probably to me, that's kind of like going back home. I love being out in the country. It's a 9 to 12-month men's addiction recovery program. And we're seeing men, that's the parallel to the women's program here, not far from here. And so we take in men for that up to a year and see their lives change. It's interesting, about 70% of our staff are graduates of our own programs. So people who have seen their lives transformed begin to use their life and their experience to find purpose, as Viktor Frankl did. In his suffering, he found purpose, and so do our people, by giving back.
I was affiliated with that program for maybe 5 years through the church that I went to up there, and we used to go sing praise and worship with the group on Thursdays and saw them every Wednesday. But the success rate of that program was unbelievable. I have a friend that went through the male program, and his wife went through the female program through the Midland Players and all of that. They have a wonderful home now, a daughter that's beautiful. She's 3. And just what you guys meant to this group of men, making them all inclusive, and the social aspect and the Christian aspect of it is changing lives, brother. That's a great program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have another, you have a library? Is there a question over there? I know we have one here, Ian.
What's the average age of your residents, and how long do they stay?
Good question. The average age of our residents and how long they stay. For a homeless mother with children, the average length of stay is going to be about 5 months. For a homeless man that comes in, it's going to be about 90 days. And so it sounds, 5 months may seem like a long time, but you come in literally with nothing. You got to get a job, you got to get savings going, you got to get things in order, your kids cared for, and it's a complicated thing. So they're accomplishing a whole lot in that time. With our addiction recovery program, they're average with us about 9 to 12 months. And the average age, you'd be surprised, in the state of Georgia, the average age of a homeless man at time of death of a chronic homeless person is 45 years old. The greatest risk factor for homeless people is violence, overdose, suicide. If you look at, most people in the world are afraid of homeless people, but the truth is they're at greatest risk of being assaulted, of suicide, of all those things. And so it's a lot younger population than you might think. We do have people oftentimes in their 60s, but they're the anomaly. Usually it's in the 20s and 30s and even 40s.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's do this because of time's sake. We'll take one more.
Familiar, and I'm doing this for my friend Matt Plummer. Are you familiar with the Roy Plummer Home for Veterans and what they're doing for the veterans? Matt Plummer sits on that board, and it's a great opportunity for you to get the veterans in touch with them for their benefits and their disability.
I'll look forward to talking with you.
Absolutely. Van will be around for a few minutes after for those that will have additional questions. Want to be cognizant of your time. Van, thank you so much for taking care of someone else's Frank. Cannot thank you enough for that. Thank you. Phenomenal program. As commemoration of your visit with us today, we'll put a children's book in our local library and graft it with your name on. Let's give him a hand again. Passionate listener. Larry, I think you had a microphone. We want to hear from you. What was your week like this week? Tell us what you're up to.
I had my first Thanksgiving. Was a lot of food, good food, and I went to see a play yesterday night, Anastasia. It was really good, and France is doing good at the World Cup football, not soccer, but yeah.
Great. Let's give her a hand. Larry's our GRSP student from France, and we just wonderful to see her grow and develop and become, part of this community. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. I just want to re-welcome Staff Sergeant Anderson, and thank you for what you do, and please take back to the soldiers how much we appreciate what you guys do for us. Just a reminder, replay of today's program will be both on our Facebook page and on YouTube. Directories are in the back. Again, sign up in the back for the bell ringing over at Hobby Lobby. And remember our holiday social on the 14th. At this point, I'd like to call Reggie back up and ask you all to stand. He's going to lead us in our four-way test. Reggie, if you would.
The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendship? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you so much. Great program. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned. Got to take a photo real quick. Photo real quick. Photo real quick. Photo real quick.
All right, guys, everybody, one step that way.